Eagles Entertainment.
What's going on? I've been getting a lot of backlash and feedback from an Instagram post that I put on my Instagram story. I just want to, first off, extend an apology on the behalf of me and what I stand for, because I'm one that's fair, and I never want to put any race down or any people down. And my post was definitely not intended for anybody of any race to feel any type of way, especially the Jewish community. When I posted what I posted, I definitely didn't mean it to the extent that you guys took it. And I just want to let you guys know that I'm, very apologetic. And I just want you guys to understand that it never was intended to be, to put any race down or any religion down. I post things on my story all the time, and, I just probably shouldn't have never posted anything that Hitler did, because Hitler was a bad person, and I know that. And, I was just trying to uplift, African Americans and slavery and, just enlighten my people. So on behalf of myself, I just want to let you guys know I apologize. I didn't intend, any harm or any hatred towards any people. I'm for one, I'm for love. And I extend it every day. People that know me know I have no hatred in my heart, and I never try to, put another religion down to uplift my religion or my race. So, from the bottom of my heart, I just want you guys to understand that, and it's coming from me and my feelings. And, I just hopefully everybody respects my platform, my opinion, to try to just enlighten my people and just let everybody know that there's no hatred involved.
Welcome, Eagles everywhere, to the Eagles Insider Podcast, presented by Lincoln Financial Group. Insider Dave Spadaro with you, and we've got a great show for you as we right on the cusp of the 2020 Eagles training camp. Dates not yet official. We'll get into that in just a bit, as the NFL and the National Football League Players Association meets this week to agree to terms, we hope, on the protocols forthcoming for training camps around the league. In this podcast, we're going to visit with Ross Tucker, who we expect to be the color analyst for the 2020 Eagles preseason schedule. What will that preseason look like? And what does it mean if the NFL reduces preseason games? You got to get to 53 players somehow. Ross Tucker, in his long NFL career, made a living of impressing in training camp and in the preseason, and that's what a lot of young players are hoping to do. We're also going to give you the very latest on Eagles wide receiver DeSean Jackson and the Eagles signing another draft pick. They had 10 picks back in the spring. They've signed 2 of them. A bit more work to do. But we are going to begin with a visit with one of those players, selected in the 7th round of the 2020 NFL Draft, pick number 233 overall, Casey Toohill, an outstanding player at Stanford University as an outside linebacker, hoping to make the transition to defensive end. And he, like every one of these draft picks, looking forward to conquering the unknown.
Casey, it's right here. It's right upon us. How excited are you?
I'm extremely excited. I really wanted to get out to Philly ever since the draft happened, right? I was ready to go, and there's been a lot of, extenuating circumstances with everything in the world, not just football. But the sooner the better. I just want to get going. I want to start learning, start competing, and just get out there.
So to this point, it's been a virtual off season. I wonder, with all of those Microsoft Teams meetings and the workout program that they gave you, how much ingrained into the defensive scheme and the technique are you?
I think that's tough to say, just because, we haven't been on the field doing it, and learning virtually and studying is different than, getting out there and feeling it and making mistakes and kind of seeing how it's been done and learning from the vets and just things like that. I always liked hands-on coaching more. So, I mean, I look forward to that. But I think the coaches, and the player engagement people, Paul Lancaster and Kathy, did a really great job of making this just like the best that they could. I mean, I feel like I was still able to learn about the defense, learn about techniques, and, have our other sort of NFLPA meetings or just onboarding meetings. And I think it all went pretty smoothly. And I mean, I still feel confident that, I mean, they taught well. And I mean, I can't wait to see how they teach us, in person with how well they did virtually.
Casey, what did you do beyond that? I mean, it's been a few weeks here since that program ended, and I know the work continues for you. So what has that been like for you? What kind of workouts have you put in for yourself?
Yeah, it's just been keeping up with the Eagles lifting program that they've given me, and doing that, and continuing to do the running, the conditioning, the football drills, working with some buddies just on like some of the hand work, just things like that. Nothing's really changed too dramatically with anything like that. I mean, I've been following the same program, same type thing for a while, but yeah, just making sure I'm ready to go. My recovery work is dialed in, I'm putting in extra work, watching and studying film, things like that. But yeah, I mean, it's just, I like being on a schedule. I mean, I've tried to keep it pretty regimented ever since the meetings ended, and just kind of been doing the same thing for a while.
There's also the component of we all are still social distancing. I know you're in California. I know the numbers in California. What has that been like for you to maintain that discipline?
Yeah, I mean, it's nothing's really changed in terms of my access to where I lift, where I run, do drills, who I do things with. That's never really been a problem. But, I think just keeping in mind, reducing my exposure, being smart, wearing a mask, just very basic things just to make sure that I'm healthy and I'm keeping those around me healthy as well.
Has there been at all, Casey, I know you haven't been in Philly or around the guys in person, has there been at all a welcome to the NFL moment?
I'm pretty certain that will happen as soon as we start to play. I think that's kind of everyone's moment, and that probably comes earlier for most people when they, have mini camp and OTAs, things like that. So I'm looking forward to that. I mean, I'm sure it's going to be challenging, but I mean, I welcome that. But, just in terms of just learning from the coaches, watching film of the vets, I mean, I can already tell the level of play. I mean, it's obviously so much higher than college, and the experience and the details and the techniques, just everything, like the minutia of it all. So, I mean, just from studying that and just watching that unfold, I can already tell, and I'm sure it'll come even more full picture when I'm out there playing.
What weight will you play at? And has it been a summer of trying to gain weight or lose weight or add strength or add, what kind of focus have you had in terms of how your body might be changing?
That's a good question. So, I mean, what I anticipated, obviously, and I knew this was to be the case, now that I'm playing more defensive end too. I mean, I wanted to gain weight. That's been a goal ever since, the combine ended. That was my plan. So I've been pretty proactive with that, but also it's a fine line of not overdoing it, right? Because I still want to get in with, and I've communicated obviously with Eagles nutrition and the strength conditioning, but I want to get there and, have them work with me and things like that, just so I can make sure I'm fully on the right track with all of those goals, and to not overdo it by gaining too much weight. Because, I mean, you see that happen early on in college to guys when they come in thinking they have to be heavier, or they try to play too heavy, just things like that. So I try to learn from past mistakes. But, yeah, I have been gaining weight. I've been trying to do it in an intelligent and, kind of conscientious way, obviously, not just trying to put on ones right away. But I'm right about 255 right now. I mean, I feel really good, and I hope to continue to increase that, but I'm also just conscious of, not trying to put it on all at once so it affects my explosiveness or speed or anything like that.
And then last one, Casey, I wonder, have you daydreamed at all about what that flight is going to be like on the way to Philadelphia, what your level of emotion will be?
It's very surreal, obviously. But now it's mostly just, I'm sure there'll be nerves, but it's mostly just excitement, anticipation. I just want to get out there and start. I feel like this year has been so weird being, getting drafted and then just really just being in limbo. I mean, I've been training at home, living in San Diego, and this is the longest time I've been at home in my house since high school. So it's definitely been odd. So, just being able to finally get out there, there'll definitely be some, nerves, some anticipation, but also just a lot of relief that we can finally, get started and just let the season unfold.
Very cool. Hey, Casey, thanks, man. I'll see you in Philadelphia, probably from a distance, but I'll make sure to wave and say hi.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much, Dave.
Okay, so how does Toohill make this football team? Well, normally you'd say he'd come in, he'd open up some eyes when the pads go on, and then he'd have 4 preseason games to really impress. That does not appear to be the case, as the NFL is strongly considering reducing the number of preseason games. We've heard 2 preseason games. We've heard none. So who else to talk about it with than Ross Tucker? He's all around the NFL. He's one of the leading voices, and he's somebody who made a football living on the field, winning in the summer and in the preseason.
Ross Tucker, as we speak here, 5 weeks, the Eagles are scheduled to play the Indianapolis Colts in the preseason. This is something that you and I and Scott Graham look forward to so much. 4 preseason games. The Eagles go from 90 players to 53 players. And now we don't know what's going to happen. And I wonder what you're thinking right now about the preseason.
Well, a couple of things, Dave. First of all, always appreciate you having me. Love talking to Eagles fans. There's 2 things to talk about. Number one, I love being the television analyst for the Eagles on the preseason games. I love doing those games. But even put that aside, right? Let's talk about this Eagles team. Let's talk about what we witnessed last year. And let's talk about even my career, right? I mean, I played very well in the first preseason game and the last preseason game when I was an undrafted free agent with the Redskins back in 2001. And there's no doubt in my mind that that's why I made the team. Now, I might have made the practice squad without it, but playing well in those 2 preseason games is the reason why I made the team. So it makes me very concerned when you hear that they sound like it'll be at most 2 preseason games, maybe none. And what I don't really understand about it is, let's think of it logically, right? I understand that the players' union is pushing for less preseason games because they want a bigger ramp-up period and/or they don't see any reason to potentially contract the virus in a game that doesn't count. Totally understand that viewpoint. What I would say, even about the first and fourth preseason games, which are seemingly going to go by the wayside based on various reports that are out there. You and I know, Dave, the guys that play in those games, it's primarily the bottom 50 guys on the roster. And these are the same guys that didn't get OTAs or mini camp. This is their opportunity to have their life's dream come true and to make a roster or a practice squad and to show what they could do. So I think it's a little misguided to just dismiss the first and fourth preseason games, because the only guys playing in those games anyway would all gladly volunteer to play in them. And then even the second and third preseason games, which are being discussed, the starters probably won't play very much in those. And I think it's a little bit disingenuous for those guys to say, hey, we need a longer ramp-up period before we play, but then we don't need to play in any type of game environment. I have a tough time putting those 2 together.
Well, I have a theory, and I am not espousing any sort of funny games here, but let me just throw this one out to you, because I've been thinking about this a lot. Because the NFLPA is also, at least I've read, I don't know how accurate it is, that they've suggested that they don't want to have 11-on-11 practices in training camp everything is all in the name of safety, and I do understand that. But let me ask you this. Is there a possibility that the NFLPA, which is made up of players who are already in the league, want to maximize their chances of keeping their jobs, thus limiting the exposure on the field of the rookies, the draft picks, the players signed after the draft? Do you understand what I'm saying? So
I do. And my answer would be, I don't really think that's the reasoning. I think it's like a lot of people, Dave, at a lot of jobs, and I was in the NFL for 7 years. You really want to get paid the same for doing as little as possible. I mean, let's be honest. Like, think about what everybody's jobs are in life and whatever. They want to have as little contact as possible in training camp. That they wanted that before the coronavirus, right? I mean, you want as little wear and tear on your joints, as little chance of getting injured as possible. And by the way, they should want that. So I think most of it. So my question is, how much of what they're proposing is strictly coronavirus safety precautions versus, hey, here's a chance for us to have a lot less contact in practice? Because I've seen like their suggestion of the 21-day period for lifting weights and training and all that stuff. And I understand it, but the only thing I would say is there's already a 6-week break from the end of the off-season program in mid-June to the start of training camp in late July. So guys already over the years, Dave, and you know this, have come back in all different kinds of condition. I mean, there's guys that come back, they're in the best shape of their life. There's guys that come back, and it looks like for those 6 weeks, they didn't do anything. I mean, they gained 45 pounds during 6 weeks. So I don't think that they really need that 21-day period. And the thing is, even, you know, the players that are pushing to even eliminate the last 2 preseason games, those are not the guys that are going to be playing very much in them. So maybe there's a happy medium where they don't say this publicly, but there's an understanding that the starters really won't play very much in the 2 preseason games they do have, but yet they still give an opportunity for the bottom of the roster and for the guys that are the young guys to show what they can do. Because just think about last year's Eagles season and all of the practice squad players like Greg Ward and Boston Scott making plays down the stretch so the Eagles could win yet another division championship. I mean, if there's no preseason games, are all those guys definitely on the practice squad? And really, even the preseason wasn't enough for them to have enough reps to really show that they could perform like they did at the end of the regular season.
I'm with you 100%. I totally agree. And we'll look at this in 2 ways. And we're going to let's focus on those young players coming into the league. Ross, how are they going to make football rosters in the summer? What is going through their minds right now?
Well, they're trying to stay mentally strong and make sure that whatever opportunity they get, they are able to make the most of it. But it's got to be wearing on them. I mean, you know, it's an uphill climb as it is, Dave. And these kids, 21, 22, 23 years, they've been waiting for this moment. They're here. This is their chance. And I can tell you from my experience, very difficult to make a team if you're not at OTAs and minicamp. Because if you remember back in the day, there were always those, you know, trimester schools or schools on the quarter system where certain guys from like UCLA or Oregon State weren't able to be there for OTAs. It really hurts those guys. I mean, it makes a big difference. So the first couple of weeks of training camp, those guys are just going to kind of be learning, figuring out what's going on. Before you know it, they're going to have to start making cuts. They're going to have to start making decisions. It is not a good time to be a young player trying to make an impression. The flip side to that is it sounds like we might have even more expanded practice squad opportunities. So if you do flash early and show something, there will be more chances to stay on the team in some capacity and get paid during the season. So the negative is you don't get as much of an opportunity to show what you can do. The positive is it looks like there's going to be a few more opportunities. We'll see how many to actually stick around during the year and get paid.
Ross, a virtual off season for all the NFL. So look, in the past, a young kid would come in and would get a working knowledge on the field with no pads on, with no contacts. At least you're running routes. At least you're working in footsteps in concert with Jeff Stoutland. At least you're going through some of the technique drills along the defensive line, etc. Now you've had to do it all virtually. So from a football player standpoint, coming in July, what kind of base of knowledge do you really have?
Well, you should know the X's and O's and the scheme. You should know that down pat. Now, there are a lot of guys out there that they really need to physically do it on the field before they really have it down. Other guys can just see it on the board or see it on a Zoom or whatever and be able to totally have it mastered at that point. So it's going to be a really big advantage for the guys that can be a visual learner and don't need to actually be out there on the field doing it. I also wonder for some of these players if they realize how important the position-specific drills are. You know, as I got later in my career, Dave, it was less and less about lifting weights and that kind of stuff, and more about, all right, let me go to left guard, let me go to center, let me go to right guard, let me get a couple of reps just in case at left tackle, right tackle, and let me work on this pass play, let me work on this run play. I would just go over my footwork, that what my footwork could be for every play in the playbook at every position. Because really that's what's most important. I mean, the most important thing is that when you're out there, you are doing the technique that you've been taught. The problem is for a lot of these guys, they really haven't been there to have Jeff Stoutland as one example as an offensive line coach, the technique. So that's something that I would encourage those guys to work on round the clock once they get to training camp. I'm talking back in their hotel room, whatever, is the techniques that they are taught. The counter to that, though, Dave, the flip side from an Eagles perspective is, man, is it nice that they've got Doug Peterson back, that they've got Jim Schwartz back, that they've got Jeff Stoutland back. You know, these are very important teaching positions where the Eagles have continuity, where you look around the division and elsewhere in the NFL, there's a lot of changes. I mean, there's a lot of different things going on there where they're starting from scratch. At least the guys that have been around, the Kelce's, Sayamalu's, guys like that, even Andre Dillard, he's got a year under his belt with Jeff Stoutland. He should know what his technique and footwork should be on every play in the Eagles playbook.
Okay, so now let's talk about from a standpoint of the team. The Eagles spoke in just, they were so happy, 10 draft picks, able to maneuver a lot before and after the draft, very aggressive in free agency. So there are some new pieces here. How in the world does Howie Roseman and the coaching staff, the personnel department, how does it change now in the evaluation process with such limited on-field time?
Well, two ways. One is you're probably going to lean more towards your veterans, right? So at the wide receiver position, you know, obviously a guy like DeSean Jackson, maybe even a Marquise Goodwin, who's got some experience under his belt, who they traded for from the Niners, Greg Ward. It's going to be a lot tougher for Jalen Reagor, the first-round pick, the young speed guys, Hightower and Watkins. It's just going to be tougher for them to be able to make an impact early in the season. The other thing is it's going to hurt your ability to really get those young guys ready to play at multiple positions, right? So even like a Jack Driscoll, the offensive lineman from Auburn, and one of his strengths is his versatility. I'll be curious to see early in training camp how much they move him around, or do they say, you know what, we want to make sure he at least knows guard really well, and in particular right guard because of the injury to Brandon Brooks, and so maybe they just have Pryor and Jack Driscoll focusing their attention on right guard for the first week or two of camp so they can have a really good feel for that position and then test out the versatility of those guys a little bit. Whereas before, you know, Jack Driscoll probably would have been playing, and Matt Pryor might have been each playing multiple positions in OTAs and in minicamp and already have a bunch of reps in other positions. I think what you'll see is the young guys really just focusing on one spot so they can at least be competent at that one spot.
So the draft picks, you figure, well, they've got a little bit of protection. The Eagles have made an investment in them. And so you'd expect maybe the practice squad, which is larger this year, will be loaded with draft picks. Ross, what about the players who weren't selected in the draft?
Yeah, it's tough. I feel for those guys. I know some of those guys personally, and I was one of those guys. It makes it very, very difficult. It's already an uphill climb. And now, you know, I wonder, Dave, without seeing the protocols yet, how long are they going to be able to be on the practice field at all? How many reps in live drills are there really going to be? And then if you're the Eagles or any team for that matter, you want to make sure that your starters and the guys that are going to be playing in the games have plenty of reps so that they're ready to go and able to perform at a high level. And so what does that do? It gives the young guys, the last 5, 10, 15 guys on the roster, even less of an opportunity to show what they can do. It's a very difficult situation. You know, I don't want to get too far down the line, but let's hope, Dave, that there's some other opportunity for those young men next year in the spring, maybe another league, so they can at least have some way to show what they can do on the professional level and maybe work their way back to an NFL roster or an NFL training camp, because the opportunities for all the various reasons we've mentioned are going to be few and far between for them this July and August.
Ross, as we speak, we really don't know the schedule of what's going to happen once players report. Everything is still so very fluid. But I wonder, just as we look down the line, do you think a lot of these, and you mentioned it earlier, do you think some of these or many of these or a lot of this is going to be permanent in terms of just the structure of how players train and how the preseason is structured?
Well, listen, in the latest CBA, they had already negotiated for the NFL to be able to have a 17-game regular season. So I think we all already assumed that that would mean it would be a 3-game preseason. Depending on how this preseason goes, whether it's 2 games or 1 game or 0, that could be something that people point to for subsequent years. The only thing I would mention about that, Dave, is let's not forget this is professional football, right? And so every team for all of these years has had a ticket package that was 10 games, right? That's part of the ticket package. You have to buy all 10 games, the 2 preseason and the 8 regular season. So I'm not sure that they are that inclined to just get rid of 2 preseason games like people might indicate. That's 10% of a decent amount of revenue. And I never quite understood the call to eliminate the preseason games, in the sense that it's not like it's an injury risk who's playing in those 1st and 4th preseason games. I mean, it's the guys that are playing in those, the 1st and 4th, are the guys that need to be playing in them and that want to be playing in them. So these loud calls for let's shorten the preseason, I don't really understand that, unless perhaps you're a season ticket holder that doesn't want to pay the same rate or whatever for the tickets of games where the starters aren't featured. Totally respect that. Totally understand that. But from a player's perspective, and even a fan perspective of people that don't have season tickets, I've never really understood the call. I do think, though, that how things go this preseason and this training camp could have a big impact on what things look like in the future, for sure.
It's just also interesting to me. And I wonder if fans really understand that, like, teams need some of these late round draft picks or undrafted players. They need them to make the roster. It's how you work the salary cap. You can't just have veterans. And you mentioned Marquise Goodwin. If Marquise Goodwin makes the roster, his salary is like $4 million, right? And so if he doesn't make the roster, the Eagles are off the hook, and that's fine. But you can't have everybody. You can't have your 5th receiver, right, making $4 million, or you can't have your 8th offensive lineman making $7 million. You've got to have.
No, you can't. You're exactly right, Dave. And how do you have an idea of what these guys can really do to be your 8th offensive lineman or whatever, unless you have those preseason games? I mean, I think we saw that a year ago from a guy like DeSean Hall. He made the roster because of how he performed in the preseason games, and he did some good things on the field for the Eagles when he got an opportunity. He didn't get that many opportunities, but he at least showed what he could do. I just wish more people would take the preseason games for what they are, which is a little bit of work, you know, a dress rehearsal for the starters, typically in the 3rd preseason game. Some of the guys, you know, like last year, Malcolm Jenkins and Brandon Graham, I know that they wanted a little extra work in the 2nd preseason game down in Jacksonville. So take it for what it's worth. And then the 1st and the 4th are mainly for young guys to show what they can do. And I think if we all just acknowledge and accept it for what it is and understand how vital it is to the process, I don't really see what the complaints are.
Ross, what is your sense of how much America needs the NFL in 2020?
It's a great question, and the answer is I would say very badly. Look, I understand sports aren't everything, football isn't everything, but I appreciate that. What I would also submit to you is that the sport of football in America, in particular professional football, I think it has more of an impact on our psyche, on our society than people realize. I mean, I'm trying to picture, living here in Pennsylvania, I'm trying to picture what it would be like if there's no high school football, if there's no college football, so many Penn State fans, and if there's no NFL football. That would put a lot of people in a really, really dark place. And so let's hope that that's not the case, especially at the professional level. I understand that there are going to be some risks, but it seems like in Australia and New Zealand and over in Europe, they have mitigated those risks with their professional sports leagues very well. And I'd also submit to you that there are risks either way. I mean, if they don't play, it will impact a lot of people in a lot of different walks of life, whether it's media, restaurants, hotels, food, players, people that work for the team. It will affect a lot of people from a financial perspective. So at this point, there is no solution, Dave, that is without risk. There's the health risk, and there's the very real economic risk at this point.
Ross, I'd like to finish up with this. You just mentioned the various components around the game, including the media, and you on SiriusXM NFL Radio, the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, one of the most visible faces and voices, sideline games, college professional games, one of the most visible guys around the game of football. What is this all doing to you from just a professional standpoint in how you approach your profession? And I'm doing all my work, for example, in my home, hopefully getting back to the NovaCare complex here in a couple of weeks. What's it been like for you? What does it mean for you kind of in the big picture moving forward?
Well, so I'm fortunate that I had built out a studio in my detached garage a long time ago, and that's where I always did the radio show. That's where I do all my podcasts. And even, I've got a YouTube channel now, youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL, where all the podcasts can be found. So I've got the home set. All of that stuff, Dave, is actually fairly normal for me. I haven't been that affected, even doing the draft show for the Eagles from here, which was a blast, by the way. I loved it and appreciate the positive feedback from people. That's all been normal. What will change for me will be, we'll see what the restrictions are in terms of going to training camp. And then, as you mentioned, I do a college game for CBS Sports Network, the Eagles preseason. I do sideline for Westwood One on Monday nights. I'm about to be affected one way or the other in a major way, and that will be with however many games there are to broadcast and then what those broadcasts look like. I'm as curious as anyone to see, what my employers say about, hey, we're doing it from a studio, you're doing it from home. I have no idea. I've got some conference calls this week. I think everyone's still trying to figure everything out right now and to see exactly what it'll look like. I mean, even if we do have 2 or 4 preseason games, are me, you, and Scott going to the away game if there is one, or I don't know. There's still a lot more questions than answers at this point.
Yeah, I think at this point we just want the games, and that's something that, as I should say, the country needs so very badly. Ross, thank you so much, man. Good luck with everything, and I hope to see you at NovaCare here in the next few weeks when we are right around the corner. Training camp starts August 13th, the first preseason game on the schedule. Thanks, Ross.
Absolutely, man. Anytime. Thanks for having me, Dave.
All right, so let's talk about DeSean Jackson, who last week on his Instagram page made some social media posts that the Eagles, they weren't happy in the least. The Eagles, in a statement, saying the messages that Jackson shared were offensive, harmful, and absolutely appalling. They have no place in our society and are not condoned or supported in any way by the organization. So what happened after that early week statement is that the Eagles and Jackson met several times, Jackson apologizing publicly, privately as well, and the Eagles and Jackson finally agreeing late in the week that Jackson, quote, would be penalized for conduct detrimental to the team. He accepted these consequences and apologized. And as the statement reads, in our many conversations with him, it has also been made clear that this is only the beginning. We have discussed a concrete plan for how we and he can heal moving forward. He understands that in order to remain on the team, he must commit to supporting his words with actions. We will continue to assist DeSean in this process, and we also know that all in our organization need to listen and learn more about things that are unfamiliar or uncomfortable to us. So social media-wise, Jackson has been backing up his talk on his Instagram account. He said he had an opportunity to speak with 94-year-old Holocaust survivor, Mr. Edward Mossberg, and he thanked Mr. Mossberg for, quote, your valuable time and insight today. I'm taking this time to continue with educating myself and bridging the gap between different cultures, communities, and religions. That is from DeSean Jackson's Instagram page. If you don't subscribe to Jackson on Instagram, his handle, one of one. So Jackson, still with the Eagles after an ugly incident last week. And of course, we all really support DeSean Jackson as he continues to educate himself about those issues. And also the Eagles announcing that they've signed another draft pick, 6th round selection, pick number 200 overall, wide receiver Quez Watkins signs a 4-year deal. He's from Southern Mississippi. We'll see what he does when the pads go on and the team is on the field. He joins pick number 210 overall, Prince Tega Wanogo, offensive tackle from Auburn, as the Eagles have 2 draft picks signed. Of their 10, we don't concern ourselves too much with that, as the Eagles seem to always get that done in plenty of time. That'll do it for this Eagles Insider podcast, presented by Lincoln Financial Group. Thanks to Ray Doyle and to Peter Kelly for their great work. Thanks to all of you for tuning in. If you have a moment to give us a 5-star review, we would love it. It helps. We're going to ramp this thing back up starting next week as we get closer to Eagles training camp 2020. Thanks everyone for joining. Have yourselves a great Eagles day, and fly, Eagles, fly.